Hello, hello, and welcome to another week of BlackLantic. This is Hillary and Clinton.
This week, we'll be talking about a new book and audio series out of Newfoundland, where the author has uncovered some interesting history about slavery in that province. Some news coming out of UPEI and how they are accounting for a history of toxic culture, racism, and bullying that's been reported, as well as downtown Moncton's new RCMP division, right in the heart of downtown.
And before we get to the land acknowledgement, we of course want to remind you to visit our website at blacklantic.ca. We are available on all social media platforms, TikTok, LinkedIn, Threads, Facebook, you name it. We've probably got it. If you appreciate our work, feel free to donate. And of course, our good friends at CHMA play our show every Sunday. We are so thankful to be airing out there in Sackville. I think that was all of the places before I get to the land acknowledgement. I like to think I'm forgetting someone who supports or something that we do, but if you go to our website, you'll get to us. And if you're already listening to this, you found us. BlackLantic would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto, where I am seated, is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands.
We'd, of course, also like to acknowledge that we carry out our work on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Peketomunkati peoples, the territory covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726.
Did you turn it down?
Is it quieter? I've been meaning to. No, I know I apologized for its volume last week. I don't think I turned it down. I was trying to dance along during the intro like we usually do, but I just didn't have the energy today.
One of us is sick, but at least one of us is here. Last week I was not here. Thank you so much for interviewing Xandra. Episode was amazing. But I'm back. I've got lipstick on, which will make up for maybe your lack of energy is in my lipstick. And
yes, my entire energy can be substituted by your application of lipstick. Basically.
If you could get energy through lipstick application, that'll happen someday.
That's all right. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Sweating through it all.
Of course. Well, we'll hop in. We'll hop into it so that you can hop back to bed. Would you like me to start with what's going on right in downtown Moncton?
Let's do it.
So, coincidentally, right after we recorded our last episode of the year, I hopped onto social media and saw this post by Downtown Moncton, which I still follow because I still love Downtown Moncton. And they posted, have you noticed the new tenant at 795 Main Street? The Kodiak RCMP recently opened their new community policing office in downtown Moncton, which means that there's increased police visibility in our downtown core. With this new office, Kodiak Regional RCMP is located right in the heart of our community to help keep downtown Moncton safe. Since settling in, they've had the opportunity to meet many downtown business owners and listen to your concerns regarding downtown safety. Kodiak RCMP and Downtown Moncton Centreville Incorporated are committed to the safety and security of all the people and businesses who make downtown Moncton so vibrant. And then it, says if you see any suspicious behavior, have concerns, call like the non-emergency line, or there is an online crime reporting website. And if you see something that's an emergency, call 911, and then it repeats in French. And since leaving Moncton, I will say that I have felt that things have shifted drastically. There is an increased homelessness and precariously housed people's presence in downtown Moncton. I've heard lots of reports of like visible drug use and consumption, and some of the unfortunate realities of having sometimes some of those street involved peoples in the area. But as a Black woman, I don't know that I love increased policing on Main Street when I think that they still have that police, like I think the RCMP office is still at that corner of downtown. So now they've got 2 offices 3 meters from each other. And they also still building like a super complex. So what are we doing?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So the news that this downtown new street patrol office first came about over a year ago, I think in synchronicity with the announcement of the $30+ million news station that's being built on the corner of Assumption and Bon Harvey, which is very big and visible and kind of overbearing, like sitting on the top of a hill. But yeah, so there are 2 currently operating side by side with the intention of making the public feel safer. Now, like you said, as a Black woman, as a Black man, I personally don't ever feel safer in the presence of police. I know that I'm not saying we should have a society without police, but an increased police presence doesn't make me feel safer, and it doesn't, I believe, make a number of the immigrants that have moved here feel safer either. There is an inherent trauma response
Mm-hmm.
in people of our color skin, even when we've done nothing wrong, just by the visual observation of a police officer. I was in the mall over the weekend, and they had a kiosk up where they were recruiting for additional police were there recruiting, standing there talking, and it's not a comforting feeling. You are right, though. However, Moncton has changed a lot in the past 10 years. There is a huge increase in homelessness. There is a large increase in drug use and homeless people
Yeah.
downtown. And I think that's reflective of the entire country, North America,
Mm-hmm.
and the world. Economically, we are all struggling, and I just don't know that pouring more money into policing is going to really fix the problem. It's an illusion of safety. What they're really there for, I imagine, if you read between the lines, is to uh, harass and remove homeless people from the
Yeah.
street, get people on drugs out of the way. It's a band-aid, right? It's to visually make things appear safer. I don't have the data or statistics about whether the increase in homelessness has increased crime, has increased violence, or if it's rather just people don't like to see it. When I used to live in the New West End, I knew a group was formed. And the community members, what you would call middle class people, they had a couple meetings in churches, and there was a lot of anger just from the fact that they could see them, they were around,
Mm-hmm.
they'd be walking around making people feel unsafe. Now, when you're from a big city, you see homeless people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There were some stories about people homeless people going into people's backyards and stuff like that, but no real violence. And just, again, it's taxpayer money and millions and millions of dollars being poured into this. I don't see how. I don't think it's going to make anything safer.
Of course.
Um, it's just really the appearance of. It's an illusion, the appearance of safety, and our tax dollars
Absolutely.
being poured into it instead of putting that money into social services and mental health addiction services and such like that.
I agree. I'm still pro abolishing, in quotes, the police by reallocating those funds to social services. I just think that criminalizing things that cannot be rectified because those social services don't exist is just creating a more complicated situation. I forgot that I wanted to also cover this story, and it ties into this, so I'm going to mention it really, really briefly. But in Winnipeg, at the shift of like the new year, a 19-year-old Black man was shot and killed by police.
That's right.
And so to discuss the fact that police are supposed to make people feel safe, I feel like since the murder of George Floyd, I've seen an increase in police gun violence and police brutality against minority groups in Canada, which is so bizarre that like something has occurred and we're seeing it more and more. But just very briefly, 19-year-old Afolabi Stephen Opaso was shot and killed by police at the beginning of the new year. His family's still searching for answers as what happened to his loved one, who they believe was experiencing a mental health crisis at the time. He's a student originally from Nigeria who was studying at the University of Manitoba. And the family does say that a lawyer is assisting the family, and they're just trying to understand, like, was shooting actually necessary? They don't believe that he would have been armed. And so again, we're facing more of these situations where mental health, a mental health checkup is turning into violence against a person, which is an undue of excessive excessive force. So with that in mind, why would I want them within like within a 1 block radius of each other? If to me, they just perpetrate more problems and unsafety, a lack of safety.
It's wild. It's wild because the simple fact is minorities make up less than, I don't know, 10% of this country probably. I don't have the actual statistics, but I know Black people make up less than 3% of the population of Canada. And in places like Winnipeg, probably even less. And it's just, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you just don't hear those stories about white people getting shot by police during mental health checks, and that's all there is to it. Bottom line, it's an Indigenous or a Black person or someone from somewhere in the Middle East or Arabia or North Africa. It's just not white people getting shot by cops, and it's not to say that white people would never answer the door with a knife. It's just that the reaction, the inherent bias built into thinking that people of color are more dangerous and so need to be shot quicker, as opposed to talked down, or the police officer steps back or like not runs away, but takes an alternative method than to just whipping out the gun and shooting a 19-year-old child, a baby.
I don't see a 19-year-old as an adult man. I see that as still a kid. I think that's devastating.
That's what it is. It's the inherent bias, right? It's just, I don't know. I know there's thousands of mental health, what's it called? Wellness checks performed yearly, and not saying they're never dangerous situations, but it's the people of color that get shot. And that's just what continues to not change. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you. Would you like to talk about what's going on at UPEI next?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just got an interesting report of UPEI, and this is interesting because we are still hoping to talk about this, even though this happened last year. There were incidents over here in New Brunswick at Sackville Mount Allison University of a hate crime taking place within a safe space designated for Black students. The university still to this day has been rather hush-hush about it, other than to say an incident occurred. I find for a university to not be transparent, open, and honest about social issues to be concerning. We are aware that we broadcast out of that town on CHMA radio, which is located in Mount Allison University. And to date, I found that the approach has been hush-hush. I still don't know what exactly happened. I know there were some slurs written on walls, but I also heard that this was one of many incidents. However, so for UPEI, they have recently released an action plan that they have released to the public, where they had input from a number of students, professors, and residents regarding allegations over the years of a toxic culture, bullying, and racist behavior. And they released a 95-page document about their plan to address this. I guess last June, which was, let me just pull this up. I'll read a little bit of the article. It's not a very long article, but they're seeking community input on the preliminary draft of their action plan. It comes more than 6 months after the release of a critical report that concluded the school has a toxic culture of bullying, harassment, and racism. They've taken input from more than 350 campus members through two town halls and 16 listening sessions. Dr. Greg Keefe, the interim president and vice chancellor of UPEI, was pleased to announce the participation from the community, as well as all the concerns that came up. Also, last June in the UPEI review, it was commissioned after the departure of a former university president amid accusations of inappropriate behavior. So basically, this article is addressing claims of, I guess, I'm repeating myself, but toxic culture, bullying, and racism in UPEI. PEI is pretty diverse, located within a pretty diverse city due to their large amount of immigrant students as well as tourism every year. Me growing up in PEI, I can't say that I've experienced a lot of racism while visiting. Of course, I was usually visiting family. However, I have heard whispers about like the way the students are treated on that campus, and it's interesting to hear this report coming out now. What are your thoughts on it, Hillary?
Well, I opened it briefly, and I would say that it's sort of, once you get into the meat of it, in terms of this draft review, it looks like a bit like Manju Varma's systemic racism report, in the sense that there are recommendations like encouraging a deep understanding of workplace fairness for the next president, DEI measures that need to be taken place, proper leadership training, a culture of listening, and it goes on and on and on, as well as having a land acknowledgement and a public apology from the UPEI as well. I would say that I think we've spoken to some people who, have maybe experienced some racism in PEI. I've never experienced anything there, but we have covered the story of how the university was getting Nigerian students predominantly to pay several $100s to take an English competency test without realizing that Nigeria is an English speaking African country. So I definitely do suspect and understand where there are, holes and some flaws and things that need to be adjusted. I think that having this document, though, and being so thorough in terms of the amount of town halls, meetings, the way that they've, created this group, and even looking at, in this document, it lists the people that were consulted, and there's queer representation. There's people who are part of BIPOC Usher that, is affiliated with some of the organizations we've worked alongside. And so it seems like they're really making an effort in comparison to other schools that we know, organizations that we know. I do hope that by doing this, obviously, unlike the Commissioner of Systemic Racism's report that was done, given to some people who then threw it away, allegedly. Apparently, not allegedly. I just imagine Blame Higgs throwing it into a garbage bin as he cackles over the money that the Irvings give him, or something nefarious. Hopefully by the university doing this, they will actually implement the changes that are recommended, since they are the ones championing this. Because some of these things sound really great. There's also so many like resources and ideas and documents to consult that are it's just like a robust now like learning document that I really respect.
Oh, oops. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't grow up in PEI, but I've been there a gazillion times, and I said that I didn't experience a lot of racism while visiting, but at the same time, I did experience a lot of racism while visiting New Brunswick. So I just mean, PEI is a really different province, and I find it really good that they're just basically tackling this head on. Like, it's very open, it's very transparent, and I find a difference between, so far, the way I've seen this covered in New Brunswick. And I had to laugh when you said BIPOC Usher, because this just puts images in my head of Usher and representing the people. I don't know. Okay.
Like the singer Usher, or
the
a
singer,
church
artist.
Usher?
No, the
Well,
singer Usher. Yeah,
Usher is BIPOC Usher because he is the B of BIPOC.
I
I
know.
always was like, is it USHR? But it's apparently Usher. But I also think it's really interesting. Sorry, I was still scrolling. They have
Yeah.
one of the things listed as restrict the use of NDAs. And I love that, because this whole concept of transparency, that's
Yes.
so interesting. And I would have never considered that. Also creating an on-campus equity, diversity, and inclusion office. There's some a harassment and discrimination policy. I think 10 10 10s across the board. Hopefully it
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, obviously, a lot of effort was put into this document, and regardless of what happens, you can Google it yourself and look it up. Like, it's we haven't obviously read it not obviously, we haven't read it in detail, but you can see that someone has put the work into to make it better, and that's what's important. That's absolutely what's
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting into our third topic, which excites me because I got to do a little bit of extra research, and we know I love some frickin' research, and we also know that we love learning about Black Newfoundland. And I recently also said to somebody else, "Did you know that there are Black people there?" Well, now, audience, did you know that there were slaves there? I think based on what we've learned about New Brunswick and the depths and lengths that we've gone to for the knowledge that we have, I'm not very surprised. But this article did come up. It is on CBC's website about a book called Black Harbor, and it is exploring the history of slavery in Newfoundland. It was co-authored by Heather Barrett and Xavier Michael Campbell. So Heather Barrett is actually appears to be a white CBC producer and the host of Weekend AM, and Xavier is originally from Jamaica but came to the province of Newfoundland as a university student in 2008. And they've both come to the realization that you and I and several people have about all of the Eastern provinces is that we're taught in school that there was this one type of settlement for this quote. Heather says English and Irish because it's Newfoundland. And that's all who ever lived here, but that's not true. So Black Harbor, Slavery and the Forgotten Histories of Black People in Newfoundland and Labrador is going to explore, the fact that there were slaves in Newfoundland and the real stories of Black people in Newfoundland, a lot of it touching on some of the similarities that Xavier found when thinking about Jamaica and, their national dish and the fact that, there's salted cod as well in Newfoundland and finding these similarities. He goes on to say lower grades of salt cod went to the Caribbean from Newfoundland because it was cheap fuel for enslaved people. So in finding these similarities, they've decided to write this book. Now, what I found very interesting was we understand the premise of this book, but I no offense, CBC, I wanted to know more about slavery because you're telling me that there's a slavery, and I know you want me to go buy this book, and I very well may, but I want more of the facts. So doing a little bit more research, in 2021, there was an article about slavery in Newfoundland. Who was WH? And Xavier at the time, who is co-authored this book, was already working with CBC and did a several part series with Heather again about some of this history that they found. And so basically they were able to find outside of, again, this, the relation of the cod stocks and things that, sort of jarred Xavier. They were able to find, let me just find it in the article, the history of, sorry, my brain turned to mush. The first episode of this radio series that they've done, Who is WH, has Xavier Campbell attempting to learn everything that he can with the help of Afua Cooper, who I do know and have heard of, who is a Black Studies professor at Dalhousie. They worked together to learn more about the skeleton of a Black man that had been unearthed in 1987 near a cemetery on the south coast of Labrador with a military uniform remarkably intact. The initials WH were carved into the soles of the shoes with his knife. Given the military uniform, he's not believed to necessarily have been enslaved, but is an entry point of sorts into the topic, and little is known about him beyond those clothes. And so they basically asked the question, 200 years ago, there was this man who was laid to rest. So taking that into consideration of what has actually happened in terms of Black history in Newfoundland. And they also talk about the fact that there was ship logs and other documents that were used to prove that there would have been slaves at that, like in the 16 and 1700s in Newfoundland. So this rich history does exist, but yet again, people don't talk about it.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting about it, and that's why we talk about it, because it's not rewriting history, but it's adding to a history that hasn't been talked about in Canada. It needs to be added to the overall textbooks and overall experience of Canada. Now, none of us are from here. We all came here, no matter what our skin tone, well, not no matter what our skin tone, other than our Indigenous brothers and sisters who have been here. We all came here. But Black people have been here for just about as long as Europeans. And it just adds to the whole dynamic of the Black experience in Canada. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there is evidence now of slavery also in Newfoundland, which is not surprising, but there's also evidence of military contribution. And regardless of how you feel about militaries, what I find really interesting about this story is evidence of Black people from all the provinces, um, in Atlantic Canada here, PEI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and now even Newfoundland, evidence that they fought for the same things European settlers fought for. They fought because they believed, again, regardless of your opinion on what militaries do and what they're
Mm-hmm.
for, they fought because they believed for their own freedom, or because they wanted to defend Canada, or for whatever cause. I can't get into the mind of this man, but he was a Black man found wearing a military uniform from almost 200 years ago.
Yes.
It's just a great argument to those people out there that want to make statements like "go back to your country," or "you don't belong here," or that we didn't contribute, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's so yeah, we always do make the joke about how hard it is to find Black people to talk to in Newfoundland, but obviously they were there. I think
Yeah.
you just researched and looked up that
Oh,
there's
yes.
currently about 3,600 Black people living in Newfoundland. I believe I looked up a bit more. I think about 700 of them are Nigerian. There are
Mm.
some from the Caribbean as well, and
Yao, who we spoke to, was from Ghana in a
absolutely.
previous episode. Yes.
So a combination of immigration, of course, even in Newfoundland, which is primarily, European ancestry.
Mhm.
There are still like Filipino, Chinese, Arab, Latin American, West Asian, Southeast Asian, and of course Black people. But on top of the immigration, Black people have been there for hundreds of years, and
Yeah.
that's really important. I do recommend that we look more into this. I think I'll listen to that audio. Was it audio
Series.
podcast? Audio series on CBC,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just really important. Like when we uncovered the documents years ago about the proof of Black slavery in New Brunswick, like 3-4
Yeah.
years ago, people were shocked. There was a lot of deniers, and
Yeah.
through your contact in the provincial archives, we were able to
Meredith.
really get this word out there.
Yeah.
Meredith Batman, yeah, check out their book as well. Um,
Yes. Yes,
but
their book
yeah,
that's being turned into a Paramount Plus series. I'm very excited about that. I forget if I've ever said that on the show, but good friend and ally.
but
Um,
sorry, last thing is that,
yeah,
yeah, Xavier Campbell, who I believe is a Jamaican immigrant, he is doing the work over there, and
yeah,
amazing on him. And I hope that we can talk to you on the show one day, Xavier, and learn about from the mouth of yourself what you've uncovered and what's going
absolutely.
on over there.
I'll
Very
add
interesting.
briefly the quote that I was looking for is that Professor Barry Galton found that there's evidence in the 17th century of evidence of slave ownership in Newfoundland from ship's logs, church records, and archaeological digs.
Right.
I also think it's really interesting that all of this sort of stemmed from the relationship of food and how a food in Newfoundland reminded him of a Jamaican food. And
Hmm.
that really sparked this idea of, well, why is there this Jamaican potentially influence in Newfoundland that is so Eurocentric? And now he's, an author, a radio documenteur, all from just moving somewhere to go to Memorial University. So I definitely would love to interview him and expand our roster of Black Newfoundland people that we know.
Yes,
We're
King.
working on
Yes,
it.
Xavier. Food connects us all.
Yes, it
Yeah, we
does.
will reach out to him, and yeah, hopefully he can be on the show.
Amazing. What a concise episode, just because
Hmm.
you're sick. But let's
Hmm.
see what this does. How do people feel about a 30-minute ep? Let us know if you're still here. We hope you are.
How do you feel about it? Yeah, and if anyone does comment, would you like us to cover more things quickly when it comes to our topic episodes? If there's, well, because you and I were always skimming through like 6 or 7 potential stories, and then we're like, okay, let's talk about these 3. Do people want to hear about more things quickly? Do you like the longer format when we get in like really in depth about topics? Let us know. I think that's it for today. I am going
And I
to
do
crawl
think
back into bed. Go ahead.
crawl back into bed. I was just going to say, I believe next week our guest will be a restaurateur from PEI. So make sure for once I have
Yes.
enough things lined up for the year that we can
Yep.
pre-promote. So tune back in next week.
All right. All right.
Sorry, it's in such a good mood in comparison to you. Go to bed.
Peace.